We are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. This is part one of the Youth Summit on Youth Policymaking. And it's the first Youth Summit on Youth Policymaking, otherwise known as WICE. My name is Paul Lachelier. I am the founder and the director of Learning Life, the organization that's organizing this Youth Summit. This discussions you might have noticed is video recorded, and I'll be taking screenshots for our records and to report to the public about the summit. You can keep your camera off if you wish, but we do encourage you actually to keep your camera on to remain engaged, and so we can convey the diversity of young people that are participating, as well as mentors in this first summit. You should feel free to introduce yourself in the Zoom chat. And so I'm going to include here in the Zoom chat, which you can share. So your first name, your last name, your city, your state, school or organization, and whatever else that you want to share about yourself. Let me place that in the Zoom chat. Hold on a second. Okay. So feel free to introduce yourself in the Zoom chat, and I will encourage you to ask questions, make comments in the Zoom chat during the presentations. We'll get to those when we get to discussion. I will encourage those of you who have not spoken over the course of this first session to speak up because we want to encourage wide participation. Lastly, before I kind of introduce the structure of today's meeting and the speakers, I want to just remind you that for those of you who are on LinkedIn, that you are encouraged to join our DMV Democracy Learning Community on LinkedIn. So I just put the link in the Zoom chat. If you are so technically, LinkedIn does not allow you if you're under 16 to participate to be on LinkedIn. But if you are 16 or older, you can be on LinkedIn. We encourage you to be on LinkedIn. It's actually good for your future, and you can set up a free account. And it's going to be a way in which we connect you to your fellow deliberators in this youth summit, as well as to our summit mentors who are younger and more experienced policy professionals, and to a wider community of people who care about democracy in the Washington, D.C. region. Um, so with that said, let me introduce you guys to kind of the structure of this first part of the Youth Summit. Um, the um, we are going to have first in the first hour a kind of, you might say, a crash course or an introduction to policy making. We will have three of our youth mentors present to you in an interactive way about policy making. Those three young policy mentors are Victoria Paul, who's a recent American University Law School graduate and a Justice Catalyst Fellow with the Economic Justice Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Second is Zaid Hamid, a Master of Public Policy graduate student at George Mason University and a government affairs intern at the American Chemical Society. And Chelsea Dade, who is the founder and owner of Communicate for Health Justice, LLC, um, a health equity and social justice focused health communications consulting platform. So they will be speaking first, and then we will hear some thoughts from some of our more experienced policy mentors. So Paul Friedman, who is the founder and executive director of Safer Country, a gun violence prevention nonprofit, will offer his thoughts. And we'll invite other mentors to chime in. So we are pleased to have the former mayor of Alexandria, Allison Silberberg, with us. So she will surely chime in at certain points. And we may have other mentors online. I think Suzanne Lachelier, my sister, who's going to be one of the mentors, is online, as well as some others. So we'll ask them to chime in. I also want to highlight Leah Merivaki. She's a professor at Georgetown University who is with us, and she is going to be moderating the session in person on Saturday, October 4th. So this is part one. Part two is Saturday, October 4th, in person, All Souls Church Unitarian, and she will be moderating at that time while I manage the wider festival. So those three mentors plus our experienced mentors will speak, offer their thoughts, and they will be engaging you. The young mentors have planned an interactive session with you. And then afterwards, we will be around 2 o'clock. We will be pivoting to Europe. We will be watching a short video. It's about 16 minutes. It's an interview created actually specially for us by Child Rights International Network. CRIN.org is an advocacy group that is trying to get the voices of young people involved in policy making. So they will be that interview will feature two young people from Europe who are 18 years old, a climate advisor from Ireland, Niam, and Ben, a climate advisor from Belgium. And then those two people will be accompanied by Leanne Manazian, who is the co-director of Child Rights International Network, and Katie Reed, who is an advisor to Child Rights International Network on children's rights, climate, and democracy. And then following that video, we'll hear from Andrzej Barta, and I am probably, Andrzej, butchering your name. I apologize. He is a Czech Republic-based youth researcher and a senior associate at People, Dialogue, and Change, which is a consulting group in Europe specializing in youth participation. So we're really happy to have him here with us. So, without further ado, we're gonna kick things off and have our young mentors start off this session.
Good
Vic,
morning or good afternoon, everyone. Excuse me. Paul, do I have share screen permissions?
you should.
Okay, let's see. All right.
Yep.
So we're gonna kick it off. I hope you all are having an amazing afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. We're gonna start with our introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Dade, she, her pronouns. And as you can see here, I got involved in policy actually after my studies. I predominantly studied psychology and public health, but those things are so interlinked with public policy, and that's how I got involved. And then my fun fact is I was a competitive rhythmic gymnast in high school. It's good to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zaid Hamid. I'm a Master of Public Policy candidate at George Mason University. But before that, I was a high school student at Manassas Park High School. And I got involved in public policy my senior year of high school, was elected a senior class council, realized I don't know the first thing about representing people. So I met with my state delegate, Danica Rome, and she was like, well, this is the 1, 2, 3. From that initial meeting, I gained really a lifelong interest in public policy and public service, which has led me to higher education advocacy and now professional advocacy in science. And fun fact, I was my university's commencement speaker last year.
Hi, everyone. My name again is Victoria. I got involved in policy making as a young student. I was involved in a city council mentorship, which then led into me getting involved with the city manager's office, where I was just exposed to a lot that was happening in local politics and the people that were making it happen. I also was in speech and debate and specialized in congressional debate. So it was essentially like a high school version of what Congress does. And I thought that was really cool. Like I could just make up an idea and then convince other people to agree with it and then hopefully win. So from there, I decided to commit my career to that, more of like a public service angle to address issues that I saw in my community. And now that's what I'm doing in my career as Justice Catalyst Fellow. And fun fact, I have a cat named Motley, and he may pop in, he may not. We'll see. All right, so we are going to kick it off with a question for y'all to ponder. Maybe you put in some of your answers in the chat, but we wanted to ask what inspired some of you to get engaged in policymaking or want to be here today and learn more. There's so much happening in different factions in the world and so many different things that can inspire folks to get engaged in policymaking. So I'd be curious to see what inspired y'all and from what lens y'all are engaging with today's program. So feel free to drop that in the chat. I'll probably read one or two, and then we'll kick it off with what is policymaking? Okay, maybe we're a little shy, but if anything comes up, you can feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, so when I think about policymaking, I like to think about it in two ways. One, a process and a tool. And thinking about it as a process, it is essentially how rules and regulations are decided, things that really impact your day to day. And thinking about it as a tool, it's a tool for advocacy. So thinking about how you can change things that you are seeing or reinforce the things that you are seeing and expand them so that other people can also be governed by such policy. And thinking about policy making, it's really important to think about who is involved in policy making, and that can range from your elected officials, appointed officials, advocates, and community members. So in thinking about elected officials, that could be as high as the president of the United States, your mayor, your governor, your city council. All those members are people who are elected by the people. So they are inclined to do what the people that elect them would like them to do. You also have your appointed leaders. I often think about this as people who are more in an executive function, which Zayed would get into, but those are more like your school principals or agency heads, your Parks and Recs director, people like that. Your elected officials oftentimes appoint those people. Or as like community members, you can also self-organize to appoint those folks. There are also advocates. Those are people who often exist outside of the formal government structure. So those are your nonprofits, people like you and me, your youth organizers, think tanks, people who have ideas that they want to advocate for, they want to pursue action on this issue. And then, of course, there are community members, those who are not formally organized, but still have opinions, those who are directly affected by policy. And yeah, so those are the various levels of folks who are involved in policymaking. So something else to think about when you're thinking of policymaking is not just the actual creation of policy, but just thinking about how it shows up in your everyday life. Policy literally impacts your electricity. It impacts the time that you start school. It impacts what time does the heat kick in the winter time. So are all things that are policy decisions and that you potentially have a say in if that's something that you choose to advocate for. So I want to engage us in a little activity, thinking about cell phones in schools. For those who are in DC, that is an issue that the City Council has been considering. There's an active bill about how to address this issue. Different places within the DMV have different rules on cell phones where there's a bell ban. Teachers can make up the policy for cell phones and whatnot. So given that DC right now, in terms of like the district, doesn't have, well, for example, I'm from Florida and there is a cell phone ban across the state. And it's not a bell-to-bell ban, but it's a classroom ban. And it's actually state law that like we cannot use our phones in our classrooms. So DC, the district, doesn't have as like widespread of a policy. The different districts, like DCPS and the charter schools, like have their own rules, but it still can vary from school to school. So given that you don't have a policy on it now, I want y'all to take a couple of moments to think about how you would want to approach cell phones in classrooms. If you could decide what the rule would be, what would that be? And also think about the various things that you would consider, right, in deciding what your rule is. So you'd want to consider, like, do I have an opportunity to learn based off the policy that I have? What does the discipline actions look like? How does my teacher enforce it? How would the school enforce it? So take about a minute or two and think about what type of cell phone policy you would have in your school. And feel free to also drop that in the chat. I'll give us about a minute to two, so I'll wait until like 1:20.
Victoria, do you want to post the question just in case somebody missed it in the Zoom chat?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm also taking the time to read your reasons that inspired you to policy in the chat. It's very exciting. All right, it's 1:20. Please still continue to drop your proposed policies in the chat. Would anybody like to unmute and discuss their policy? Feel free to raise your hand. Okay, I'll read one. Oh, we have a volunteer. Perfect. Um,
Potential. Oh, sorry, my bad.
you can go, Quinn.
Oh, sorry.
Um, I don't like the yonder pouches. Especially because in my school, no one uses their phone outside of class. Like, no one even uses their phone, period, until the end of the day. And when we have yonder pouches, the only thing that, like, people do is they try to open their yonder pouches because when you take something away, it makes us want it more. And if you do end up using your phone a lot, I think it is right that they're able to take it away if you're actually using your phone. But other than that, yeah.
DPM.
I think if people want to use the phones, just let them. They're just not going to learn anything. Like if they want to do something, let them do it, but like they just don't learn anything. So like I know it sounds like bad, but like if they want to use a phone, just let them use a phone. They're just not going to learn.
And DBM, if you could change in all your cases, it helps us with record keeping, change
Oh yeah, my bad.
your name on your on so that we can see who you are. That would be.
Yeah, my bad. I got it.
And also just raise your hand electronically so Victoria can call on you easily. And that's easier way for her to manage.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm gonna pick Ellie next, and I did notice in the chat that there are two folks who have differing opinions on a policy. I think that's like a really important part of the policymaking process. So if anyone would want to share like a dissenting opinion, I think that would be great. Ellie, you can go.
I think there should be like rules about phone usage in school because it is an active problem and it is stopping students from learning. But I also think like when I was in school last year, that's when they first started bringing out the Yonder pouches. And like during lunch, there's obviously not much school to do during lunch, but like you couldn't have your phone out then. And I think there's no point in that. And plus, like where I live, our school system doesn't have the funding for Yonder pouches. So they're taking away the funding that is for educational purposes, things like workbooks, desks, to control students, which doesn't help us learn anything.
That's a really good point. I love that you use like resources to defend that. We'll go to Phoenix, and then I want to go to Atish. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, and then we're going to move on with the presentation.
Okay. In my school, we don't have yonder pouches, but we have a policy in which we can't have our phones out during the day. Our phone has to be in our locker the whole day from 8 to 3:30. And I think in that case, as long as it's in your locker, either off or silenced, you can have your phone like in your locker the whole day. And if and in case of emergency where you need a phone to contact like a parent or an emergency service, if you don't have access to like the office's school phone, then I think it's okay to go use your phone, but only in a state of emergency, I'd say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like there's a few things like the idea of like not using it at lunch. I feel like is actually more valuable in a sense because you also have to have that social interaction, and a lot of times that's kind of taken away when people are on their phones. And with the safety thing too, I mean, in an emergency, the last thing you want is for everyone to go out and take out their phones and call their parents. You want everyone to be attentive and, pay attention to the teacher and what their teacher is directing them to do. Um, but yes, and I also understand, Ellie, that yonder pouches are super expensive. It's like $20 to $30 per student. So it's only like a feasible solution for a like select group of school districts that can afford it. That being said, like policies where it's in your backpack are also like shown to not be super effective because there's no like extreme like physical separation from your phone. So they tend to like wane over time. So just having some sort of physical separation from your phone, and doing things to kind of increase student buy-in, like having them co-design the policy or have like some form of positive reinforcement. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much, Atish. Am I saying your name correctly?
Atish. Yeah, it's close.
Thank you so much. I actually debated this issue in a policy making competition, and all of the points that every single one of you have made is exactly what we debated in helping the city council make a decision as to which policy they would adopt. So we're definitely thinking about this in the right place. Due to time, we're going to move on to the next part of this presentation. But if you have anything else that you want to add, please feel free to put it in the chat and keep that conversation going amongst yourselves. Thank you.
This is my section. Hello, everyone. I come from Northern Virginia, so my presentation is geared more towards the Virginia policy process. I recognize there's people from all across the DMV area here, and states like Maryland and Virginia function a little bit differently from DC in the policy context. What does remain across the three areas is that you can be involved, no matter what your age group is, no matter what your interests are, no matter what your beliefs are. There is room for you in the policy process. You have council meetings in DC, you have school board meetings, city council meetings in Maryland and Virginia. What Virginia has in a very robust manner is our General Assembly. Our state legislature is the oldest continually functional legislature in the entire hemisphere. And one of the incredible ways that you can participate with that is requesting that a bill be drafted by your legislator. I hosted a Build Your Own Bill workshop at George Mason's campus with our state legislator, Saddam Sadim, on Friday. And we had over a dozen students come out with different bill ideas, ranging on things from taxation policy to residency status for tuition to disability policy. And we created a space for students to pitch ideas and get all of the ideas pitched to that state legislator, drafted into formal bills that would then be returned to students. Students would then have the ability to take that bill and get it sponsored by a legislator. How the process works in Virginia is that bill can come from anyone, but it has to be drafted by the Division of Legislative Services before it can be introduced by a legislator to the General Assembly. Once a legislator introduces the bill, that bill is then assigned to a committee. In the Senate, it's assigned by the clerk. In the House, it's assigned by the Speaker. So there's more of a political process on our House of Delegates side versus the Senate side. And that speaks to a larger thing that you all will learn more as you get involved in the policy world. There are some avenues that have more politics and some that have more policy. And depending on which side of that spectrum you want to work in, that will give you a bit of an insight into what you want to make your career. And some people are very good about navigating politics. Some people have poor politics and just want to focus on the meat and bones, the actual policy. But nevertheless, when a bill is assigned to a committee, it gets read 3 times, amendments can be made, and then there's a committee battle, the ayes versus the nays, for whether it passes. If a bill passes in committee, it has to pass the original chamber. Once it passes chamber, there's a date every single year, February 14th, it swaps over to the different chamber. It's called crossover. And then it has that entire journey again of being assigned to a committee, going through that committee, and then eventually making its way to the governor's office. The governor has 4 options when a bill reaches it. He can sign it as is, take no action, which results in the bill becoming a law, can veto, in which the governor can say, nope, I do not want this to be a law, try again next year. But if over 2/3 of the legislature votes to override that veto, it becomes law anyway. The governor can also suggest changes, which would have to be either approved or failed in the committee, and then legislation would, if those committee amendments pass and the legislature likes those amendments, the bill could become law. If the legislature fails those amendments and they can't reach a 2/3 consensus to overturn the veto as is, the bill fails. The legislature provides a very down-to-earth and accessible way for people to get involved in policymaking. Every state legislator, even though they work and do their policy operations in Richmond, they have home offices, they have district offices. And because Virginia has a part-time legislature, most months out of the year, that legislator is right at home with you. The Virginia General Assembly sessions are only 30 or 60 days, depending on the year. The rest of that year, that legislator is back home in their districts, and you are more than welcome to, really, you're encouraged to, shoot them an email. Ask them, hey, can we grab coffee and talk about a bill? The legislator in my hometown would absolutely grab coffee with you, probably the day for it too. But outside of the legislature, you can get involved in the executive branch for policymaking. Virginia has a student advisory committee on the high school side where high school students across different regions of Virginia can advise the governor on state education policy. There are mechanisms as well for you to get involved with school boards and other deliberative assemblies. No matter where you want to get involved in the Commonwealth of Virginia or in the DMV at large, there are places for you to do that. There are avenues for you to get your voice heard. And there are people that are willing to, just like we are today, show up for you and provide you with opportunities. I'll go pass off the presentation to the next policy mentor, and I'll leave some resources for you all in the chat.
Thank you so much, Said, for that overview. And Yeah, so I'm in Northern Virginia, so I'll also be speaking to Virginia policy. And as I mentioned, my background is in health. So I studied psychology and public health in undergrad. And I actually participated in a program called NYLF, I believe, which is focused on national youth leadership in a certain area. So I did that program at Villanova when I was in high school for medicine. So I was on the track to be like in medicine or something like that. And I was really on that track until I went to get my graduate degree in health communications in Chicago and got really involved and invested in community and in the ways in which we need to make policy more community informed. So that's what I'll be talking about today through the lens of Virginia. Um, in 2023, I was a policy fellow for a nonprofit called Birth in Color, which is focused on reproductive health topics. So, you know, making sure that women and birthing people have access to health care, prenatal care, all the things that they need for that journey. And they predominantly serve women of color, and they're based in Richmond, but they do work across the entire state of Virginia. So my role was to do the background research that would inform the policies and that we were then sending off to the committees and then the governor. And so I did research on things like IVF. I did things on research around abortion access and maternal health disparities. And so, if you're curious about this subject matter, one of the main statistics to know is that women, um, there is a statistic that says that Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to have health complications during birth or within 12 months after they give birth compared to other women. And it's a really stark statistic, and it is something that impacts Black women across all socioeconomic statuses. So that's kind of what brought me into, you know, wanting to do policy work because, you know, no one should be dealing with that experience in a such a pivotal time in their life. So I was doing research on those sorts of topics, and I found two things, and this relates to how we make policy more effective. It needs to be community informed. Um, it's easy to sit in a room and say, you know what, I think that's a great idea, and I'm just going to run with that. But we have to make sure that we are connecting with people across perspectives, across ideas, with people with different backgrounds, et cetera, and bringing them all into the process. So with Birth in Color, it wasn't just Birth in Color making the policies and then sending them off to the committees and the legislators, et cetera. It was us working with other nonprofits in Virginia. I won't name them all here, but there were at least 6 other nonprofits that we partnered with in order to inform the policy that we wanted to create and to get approved. So that's number one. You have to make it community informed, and everyone might not agree on what the final decision is, but you do want to make sure that everyone was able to voice their perspectives on it. Number two, you want your policy to be evidence-based. So you have your research. And I'm not sure, you know, what you all are learning, you know, in your respective schools. But if you have access to free research journals, or subscriptions, like there's JAMA, which is the Journal of American Medicine Association. There's PubMed, and I can put these in the chat later. And there's a whole host of other health related research journals that you can find, you know, relatively straightforward research articles on them. When I say straightforward, I mean not too wonky, not too much like jargon in them. But a lot of those subscriptions are free and they help you when you're creating some sort of idea around policy. And these are specific to health, but and so that's what I would end with. I can, you know, go through particular bills that were signed into law that the research that I did helped support that. But I do want to just end with the most important way to make sure that policy is effective is one, making sure it's community informed, and two, that it is evidence-based.
Thank you so much for that, Chelsea. And we wanted to see if there was any questions that y'all may have for us about policy making, how to be involved as a young person. But if not, thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys. This was fantastic. Can you turn off the or close your slides so that we can all see each other? Fantastic. Let me make sure that I can see everybody. There we go. We are going to open this up and see if there are questions, but also we want to hear from some of our other mentors that are in on the call here. And I do want to mention somebody I did not mention before. Alana Hackshaw is joining us from the University of Maryland. She's a policy professor. I believe she's still with us. Alana, are you there? She
I'm
may be.
here.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi,
Okay.
everybody.
Great. And so would love to hear first from Paul Friedman. I asked Paul if he would offer some thoughts he's a lawyer and he's the executive director and the founder of Safer Country, which is a gun control nonprofit. And so he brings that perspective to this. And we would also love to hear from Allison Silberberg and others and then hear from all of you as well as your questions. So feel free to post your questions in the Zoom chat as you're thinking about them, and we'll get to your questions soon and your comments. Paul.
Well, I'm really honored to be a part of this program, and it's really vital for young people to understand our process and the value of democracy. It's a critical time in our society. My work as Paul has indicated, has been around guns. I lost a relative to a bullet when I was a young man between college and law school. But it wasn't until 2016 I got involved in this movement. I ended up becoming the executive director of the nonprofit created by the families of the victims of the Virginia Tech massacre. But a few years later, I decided to create my own organization, which I've been now running for nearly 7 years, Safer Country. And our focus has been on public awareness campaigns. We want to make people aware of the laws that exist and how we can prevent gun violence. And that interacted with policy right away, where I was able, again, I live in Northern Virginia, I live in Alexandria, and I looked at an opportunity to advance the knowledge in our state about a law we passed in 2020 that would get guns temporarily out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves or others. But most people hadn't heard about the law passing because it occurred during the time we were all suffering from COVID. And that was our predominant subject at the time. So I looked at where I could make a difference. And this is important in understanding this whole issue. There are three types of laws that you might want to pursue or policy efforts. One is a good government one, where if you identify something that everybody wants and needs, you might not find many barriers to getting it passed. You need to draft it, you need to consult other people and refine it, but you may have a really good idea that needs to be done. There are other types of issues, though. There are other kinds of policy, and that one of them is a partisan policy issue. So if something you've developed is something that the Democrats want or the Republicans want, and you align with one of those groups, you're going to have to look at the legislative body or the city council or whatever body you're aiming at and determine what kind of reception you might receive for that kind of a measure. So if it's a predominantly Democratic group, you might, and your measure is something that would appeal to them, you might find an easy path. On the other hand, if it's of a different side, you might find a more difficult path, and then you'd have to evaluate how you might overcome such barriers. In our case, we looked at how we might do this, and we decided that it was, since no money was allocated in the state of Virginia when they passed the law, that we would turn to a legislative body that was receptive In our case, Fairfax County has a board of supervisors. It's like your city council in DC. It was very supportive of this law that I described to you. And so I approached a legislator, one of the members of the board who I knew, and who was in charge of the safety portion of the work that the board does. I met with him, and I met with his top staff person, and we discussed how we might bring awareness to the public in Fairfax County about this law. We developed an idea. We were able to, with the help of the staff person, we put it into a resolution. And with the help of that member of the board, he found allies and he introduced it at a meeting, and it was passed unanimously. That's pretty much a good government bill. Even the Republican on the board passed it. And the measure was to create a public awareness campaign to get the word out in Fairfax County about the law and hopefully create a model for doing that statewide in the future. So that was successful. And then, to make it work, of course, you have to have implementation. So I was then designated to work with the Office of Public Affairs to develop the campaign. And then we moved forward on it, and we were successful in putting it out. So, but if you do come across an issue that has competing interests, you may have to look at the various parties that might be involved. It might be unions. They might be concerned about jobs. It might be a corporate interest. They might be concerned about profits. Those interests might compete, or sometimes those interests might coalesce. Both sides may agree, but the public may disagree. And we have issues like that. We don't have the time to go into them, but those issues do crop up. And at which point you may find that, which side is more powerful. That depends in part about the kind of people you're appealing to, the legislators, where their interests are, how they might get reelected, what interests, from which communities are affected. And so it gets into a deeper subject. And of course, money is always an issue, not just the funding, which is critical for whatever policy you want to pass to make it effective, but the money the candidates and the incumbents receive from various interest groups and sources, as well as the volunteer work from those interest groups and sources. They have to evaluate all of those things and determining whether or not they can support a measure. Sometimes something that's good government is something they necessarily can't support because of the various interests involved. So these are the complications of public policy, and it's not all easy, but a good way to begin is certainly to find that good government issue, something that you're not going to find opposition on, but it's a good idea. And you can bring it to your member of the legislature or your city council person, sit with a staff person, develop the idea, maybe then learn about how it goes through a committee, be assigned to work with the staff person there, get feedback about what law already exists that perhaps might address it or not. And you may have to refine the law accordingly or the policy you're seeking accordingly. So I would say that gives you an overarching idea about public policy, a little bit of my own personal experience. And of course, I remain available for questions if you'd like. Thank you.
Awesome, Paul. Allison, would you like to share your thoughts? Again, Allison is the former mayor of Alexandria, Virginia.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for convening this gathering, and hello to everyone, and to Paul's sister, Suzanne, hello. Great to see everyone. I am so fascinated by this gathering that Paul has created, and I want to say kudos because I think it's so important. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. The hallmarks of our fragile democracy, our fragile republic, which we see currently. It is up to each of us and all of us to participate and to speak out, and we can make a difference. I was honored to serve first as vice mayor on the city council of Alexandria and then as mayor of Alexandria. And I left office in January of 2019. So, but I was deeply involved in my community of Alexandria and across the region in general as well, helping those in need for 20 or more years. So it really, running for office was really an extension of that. I loved meeting with students from across Alexandria while I was mayor and as vice mayor, but especially as mayor, where students of all ages came in and met with me at City Hall, or I went to them at their schools. And I spoke to them, but then I really wanted to listen to them and hear what their concerns were at that time. And I think that some people assume that students aren't going to have a thought or an issue or whatever about, what's going on. But in fact, the students had great ideas, and we took notes and helped push things forward. I did ask the students to help me as the mayor to go and plant trees across our city, to help clean up a park, to let us know what issues are going on. I met with students, I remember at one school where the kids were like 7th and 8th graders. And I said, are there any issues that you want to let me know about? And one or two of them said, absolutely. The food is terrible at this cafeteria in the school. And I took it straight to the school board that week when I was meeting with the school board chair and various members of the school board and the council. It was a joint meeting, and the school board chair and the school superintendent indicated actually at that meeting, well, we always hear that the food is terrible. And I'm like, okay, then let's fix it. Let's talk about it. And we did start to add healthier food options and I would say better quality food. But I think you've got to make it easy for people if you're in office for the public to reach you. I had a monthly coffee where everyone was welcome. We sat in a circle and I listened and took notes. Some of the best ideas I took to City Hall were from those monthly meetings. And I love the civic engagement. There are those, I just want to be upfront, there are those in office who do not love real, authentic civic engagement. That's just the truth of it. It's not too hard to figure out who loves it and who doesn't. But there was a recent issue, even though I've left office, I've been deeply involved in my community. And I just want to mention that because I'm first and foremost a citizen, right? I'm a resident of my city, and I want to make sure that things are going well here. I can't get involved in every particular issue, but there was one big issue where it looked like things were going to happen in terms of creating or building a huge sports arena in Alexandria, just on the edge of Arlington, but in Alexandria at Potomac Yard. And the way it was announced made it, well, it came out of nowhere, number one. Number two is that it was announced as if it were a done deal. The governor and the council and the mayor indicated, well, they were all for it. I joined a small group, a band of brothers and sisters, very small group, but we had a huge backing from across the region, but especially across Alexandria, actually. And we went to Richmond 3 times and spoke with people and created bonds, in common. But the reality was that it didn't make sense financially for the city. The devil's in the details. One council member admitted to me that they were told it was a good deal for the city and therefore they were for it. So they hadn't actually read things. You have to read your material if you're in office, even if you're not in office. And the other thing is that it was a bad deal for the Commonwealth of Virginia for 40 years or more. And then of course the traffic impacts. You have to, whenever you're in office or when you're not in office, you want to think about how's that going to affect the quality of life for the community? So those are just a few thoughts. I love the fact that y'all were talking about the cell phone usage. I know that a lot of cities are looking at that issue right now. And I thought it was fascinating to hear the pros and cons that the students were sharing. And so if you are in office, or even if you're not, I think listening, really being open and listening to the concerns on all sides of an issue will really help. And I look forward to hearing more about what the students are interested in and if there's anything I can do to be of any help. So I'm honored to be with you.
Great, Allison. We're honored to have you here. I am going to take some screenshots if you guys don't mind, because we need to share who's participating. If you can turn on your, if you're willing, turn on your videos, and I'm going to have you smile on three. So hold on a second. Let me get to this screenshot set. On three, one, two, three, smile. And thank you very much. I'm going to take one other screenshot. I have to, because you're on two different screens for me. So hold on a second. On three, if you could have your ready to smile. One, two, three, smile. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. We want to open up the remainder of the time. We don't have that much time until we pivot essentially to Europe. And policy making that involves youth in Europe. But I want to see if there are questions from any of our young people assembled here and or comments that you guys have thus far. Please, if you could raise your hand electronically so that we can see who wants to speak. And it would be great to hear from any of you that we have not heard from yet. So I'm going to name some names here. Jordan, Jacoby. I apologize if I'm butchering your names. Letitia, Rideat, Brissette, Miles, Dallas. There are others among you that we haven't heard from. Tyson, I don't know if we heard from you. Sam, Ajani, Judah, Adam, Sydney.
Someone has their hand raised, Paul.
Thank you.
Leticia has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Okay, can you repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, what do you have any questions or do you have any thoughts on I think what we're particularly interested is figuring out because we need to this session is really in preparation for you guys meeting in person next Saturday. And so any issues that you really care about that you think you want to advance and talk about at the session the Saturday, October 4th session in person. And otherwise any questions that you have.
Oh, I guess to answer if there's any issues that I really care about, I would say probably redlining or gentrification in DC. And then for like questions I have about the program, I wanted to ask how how these meetings are going to transfer into something tangible or create change.
Great question. And I'm glad. So for those of you who may not know what redlining is, Letitia, do you want to just briefly explain or do you want me to explain?
You can explain.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot. So redlining is essentially when, and it literally there were red lines drawn around particular communities to bar particular people from buying in those particular places, buying homes. So it was essentially part of a de facto segregation. It was not legal, but it was happening and so Letitia's essentially concerned about the tremendous segregation that exists in a lot of cities, including the Washington, D.C. region, where poor and rich people live in very different neighborhoods and have very different outcomes, including health outcomes. And Chelsea can probably speak for days about this stuff. But yeah, it's a really good issue for Letitia to bring up. And to answer Letitia's question, like, uh, really good question. And our intent in the long term is for you guys to be, you're essentially the forefront and the pioneers, you might say, of what we plan to be a deliberative body of students starting at the classroom level, and then proceeding to school level, proceeding to interschool level in the DC region, that helps to inform policy making in at the school level, the city level, the county level, and or the state levels. Um, we want to do this for a variety of reasons, but one of them is, as Mayor Silberberg indicated, democracy is fragile, and we need young people to be involved to strengthen democracy and to be prepared to be active citizens throughout your life. And we have clear evidence that younger people, when they're involved at a young age, they're likely to remain involved throughout their lives. So it's really important to get you involved at this age. But it's one thing to just make it an academic exercise in school. It's another thing for your deliberations to actually contribute to policymaking. But that's not going to happen overnight. But in the short term, Letitia, and for all of you to know, I think the important thing to know is that after the summit on October 4th, we are going to be preparing a report, and we want to present that report on the summit to civic associations and elected officials, and former elected officials like Mayor Silberberg, um, so that they can help inform and advise and so on as we move forward with trying to quote unquote institutionalize or make your voices actually heard in the halls of power. And for you to be actually part of the power making process, the policy making process. So I hope that clarifies things. And you will, by the way, be invited. All of you will be invited to those presentations. They may happen in person or online, and you'll be welcome to actually speak at those presentations, so that your voice is heard and continues to be heard. There's more to it. I'll say more. But we have a couple of other questions, and then and then we need to switch over to Europe essentially, and hear from a video and then a speaker who are joining us live from Europe. Tyson, you're next. Question.
So there is kind of a topic more about the more tangible side of policy. How often do you think, for the people that have done the policy side of it, private interests or more powerful interests get in the way of good policy making? Yeah.
Just to maximize participation, I'm wondering if one of you, of our mentors who has not spoken yet, if you can address this and raise your hand if you would.
I'm happy to do so.
Great.
I'm sorry I'm off camera, but I have a bunch of very cute kids hanging around me right now, so hope you guys will forgive me. Hi, Maya, how are you? So are you asking about how do powerful interests affect policy? Is that what you're asking? So one of the things that I was going to make a comment about, and maybe this might be helpful, is like that is always an important question. So when you're thinking about the policies that you care about and that you want to deliberate about, one thing that you want to think about is agenda setting. And agenda setting is how to get people interested or how to get a particular policy that would basically draw the interest of people who have the power to maybe get it passed, right? Sometimes it comes from legislatures, but it comes from everyday folks like us. And so what are the ideas and language that you can use to frame it that could actually get support for it, right? So that matters in terms of who's powerful. I'm not saying that the everyday person is not, right? There's power in a collective, but what are ways in which you can say, hey, I really want to get this in front of people that have the ability to make a decision about this? What are ways that I can talk about this that can draw their interest so I can get their support behind me? Because if you have folks that are in power that are on your side, you're in a very good position, right? They can go to bat for you. Just the same way if someone doesn't like the policy that you're interested in, they can use their resources, right, to sort of move against that. The other thing is you always want to think about when you are thinking about a policy, always keep in mind what are some arguments or objections that people who may not like your policy, what might they offer against it? And you want to think about that that's a limitation, and you always want to be prepared in terms of having an argument or a set of explanations that address that. So as much as you have a very powerful position in terms of how you care about a particular policy, you always want to think about the competing interests or the other side and the types of arguments that they might make that might make it a little bit harder for you, and start to sort of have an answer to some of those. So anticipating that as well is another way to think through deliberating and developing something that interests you in terms of policy. I hope that answers your question, Maya.
Great. And I think it was Tyson that was asking the question, but Alana, did you also have a comment or that you wanted, because you had your hand raised before you answered that question?
Yeah. Sorry, I slipped up. I know Tyson, so pardon, Tyson. Told you the wrong name. That was actually that was the comment that I was going to make. I was thinking it's really important to think about, there's the everyday technical part of um, how policies can get passed, how they can be deliberated upon, but you also want to think about the broader landscape and what's going on politically, because that also plays a role in thinking about, well, I'm in an environment where this is going on. Is it really feasible for this to be successful? So I always say, and I never say that should never be a reason for going after something, but always think too, what environment, what's going on in the political landscape, what's going on in the environment that could affect the feasibility of this, could affect the likelihood of this policy gaining support and this policy being passed. And you always want to think about that, because I can guarantee you there are tons of topics today that are just absolutely unpopular that had a lot of support maybe 5 years ago, right? And so keeping that in mind, I think as well, is never a deterrent, but I think it's a strategic way to think about how you might frame a policy or talk about it if you're trying to get someone's interest, or you're trying to get support for it, or you're deliberating with people who care about it as well.
Thanks, Alana. Sydney Rogers.
Hello. So something that like needs to be like brought to like attention is like the representation of like health within DC's wards 8 and 7. I live in Ward 8, and there's like not a lot of resources, especially for like the health of people. Like in DC Ward 8, there's only one grocery store that people can really go to. And I live on the border of Maryland, so I have to travel to Maryland to go to a grocery store. And then in Ward 7, it's only two grocery stores. But compared to like other wards like 1 and 2, there's a lot of more grocery stores. And I feel like that just needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, great, Sydney. And just keep in mind that when you guys craft policies of your own on Saturday, October 4th, next Saturday, you want to craft it in terms of not, hey, we want more supermarkets, but how do we get young people's voices involved in, say, food access or gun control or whatever else. So the focus here is on how do we get your voices heard, and whether it's on a specific policy like food access, or it's on more broadly, for instance, Mayor Silberberg mentioned that she had open meetings with young people, and she made that part of kind of her routine as a mayor, and that is actually something you could implement. You could call for, hey, we need to have regular meetings where young people are heard by their representatives. At whatever level of government that you choose. So just keep in mind, we're thinking about your voices on a whole variety of issues, and issues that affect you, from food access to gun control to phones in schools and so on. So Sydney, glad you're engaged. Glad you're from Ward 8, because we need to hear the voices of kids from Ward 8 and Ward 7, which, for those of you who don't know, is east of the Anacostia River. It's the part of DC east of the Anacostia River. Okay, so we need to pivot, and I'm excited to pivot to Europe. And why are we going to Europe? Because Europeans are actually more advanced than we are when it comes to the voices of young people in policymaking. And so we are going to hear first. There's a video that we're going to watch. And again, the speakers in that video are from Child Rights International Network. So crin.org. I'll put it in the Zoom chat if you want to check them out. CRIN.org. They are an organization devoted to giving voice to kids across the world. And so you're going to hear from the co-director, Leanne Manassian. She's going to lead a conversation with two 18-year-olds, Niam from Ireland and Ben from Belgium, and one of their advisors, who's an adult advisor on children's rights, climate, and democracy, Katie Reed. So the video is 16 minutes. I'm going to share my screen and show it to you. And then we're going to go directly to Ondrej Barta, who is joining us live from the Czech Republic. He's, as I mentioned, this youth researcher and a senior associate at People, Dialogue, and Change, the consulting group specializing in youth participation in Europe and across the world. Okay, so without further ado, let me share my screen and get to the right place. Hold on a second. And by the way, I love the fact that some of you are taking notes, as far as I can tell. I think that's awesome. You should be taking notes, and bring those notes with you on Saturday, October 4th. All right. Oh, she should not be muted. There she is.
We really wish that we could be there in person.
Start that.
Hello to everyone at the Youth Summit on Youth Policymaking. We really wish that we could be there in person, but we're joining you today from a few different countries in Europe, including England, Scotland, Ireland, and Belgium. So my name is Leanne, and I'm a co-director at Child Rights International Network, or we're known as CRIN. And I'm joined here today by my colleague, Katie, who leads our work on children's rights and deliberative or participatory democracy, and we'll unpack what that means, which is looking at how children can be meaningfully involved in policy decisions. We're also really lucky to be joined by two of CRIN's climate advisors. So we have Neve from Ireland and Ben from Belgium. So maybe we just do a quick introduction, just your name, your age, where you're joining from, and maybe a little bit about what you focus on. So Ben, I'll hand over to you first.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Ben, I'm 18 years old. I study at the University of Brussels. I'm a climate and children's rights activist. And what I mainly focus on is like the link between climate and children's rights and how climate influences children's rights, of course.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. And Neve, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you're all well. My name is Neve. I am from the southeast of Ireland. I'm also 18 years old, and I really focus on integrating children meaningfully into policy making, both on national levels and global levels.
Thanks, Neve. And Katie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie, and I work for the Child Rights International Network along with Leanne. And my work focuses on how we can involve children in democratic processes. And I'm particularly looking at more participation-based ways of doing democracy. So less about bringing people into the voting system and more about bringing people together and using community spaces and other types of gatherings to make sure everyone can have their say.
Thanks, Katie. So we're joining you today remotely to share a little bit about Neve, Ben, and Katie's experiences with children and young people's engagement in policy-making spaces. But before we get to that discussion, I thought I'd just share a little bit about who CRIN is and what our interest is in this issue. So CRIN is an NGO, which is a non-governmental organization, or in the US is known a bit as a nonprofit. And we work on a variety of children's rights issues. But one of the things that we really try to champion and support is the inclusion of children, their rights, and their voices in policy-making spaces. We really believe strongly that children should be heard, and that their voices should be heard in decisions which affect theirs and all of our futures. We don't think it's right that children have little to no say in these decisions that govern their lives simply because of their age. And we also think that there are ways, while the right to vote is important, we think that there are ways beyond that, that children can have a say in these important decisions, including in things like children's assemblies, which we'll learn more about. So now we're going to turn to Neve, Katie, and Ben to hear from them about their experiences of either being involved in policymaking as a young person, or in Katie's experience, helping to support children in these spaces. So Neve, I'm going to turn to you first. And my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about Ireland's Children's Assembly on biodiversity loss, when and why it was created, and also what your role and other people's roles were with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a project that's really close to my heart. And of course, I was working with Katie on it as well, way back in 2022. It feels like such a long time ago now. But yeah, no, always happy to talk about it. So back in October 2022, Ireland had its first Children and Young People's Assembly on biodiversity loss. We had 35 children and young people from all over the country, aged as young as 7, which I find really amazing, all the way up to 17 involved. And it was kind of our job to come up with recommendations and calls to action on how the Irish government can preserve and enhance Irish biodiversity. I must say we did a very good job. I think a large part of that was because we had an amazing adult team, but we also had a team of 9 young advisors, which I was very lucky to be part of myself, and I loved it. And, you know, being a young advisor, it kind of meant that I got to help design the assembly along with my 8 friends, and also, you know, run it when it actually came to the time of putting it out there and getting everyone else involved. So it was just absolutely amazing. And I think, you know, kind of the why behind having that assembly was just, there really is a bigger push for children and young people to be involved in these issues, because there's more recognition around the fact that this is going to affect their lives, not only now, but well into the future. And any policies that are being made today are also going to be standing in their future. So why shouldn't they have a say in what those policies are actually going to be? So then coming back to kind of what we did with the Assembly, we submitted 58 recommendations and calls to action to the Irish government, many of which were implemented into Ireland's newest National Biodiversity Action Plan, which is just fantastic to see. I just want to come back to that point that children as young as 7 were involved in this. So it's just a testament to the fact that really young kids can absolutely have an impact. It's not about age, it's about passion, and passion doesn't really care what age you are. If you care about this, then you should be involved. And it's as simple as that, really.
Thanks, Neve. I think it's amazing that children as young as 7 were involved. So thanks for mentioning that. So that's a really interesting context that you were involved in. But I know you've also been involved in kind of global policy making with your work on the right to a healthy environment. Can you tell us more about that and what your experience has been like within it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that some members from Crane are also involved in it, but it's just been absolutely amazing. Like, the team is so supportive. I think I'm one of the youngest members of the coalition, and they're just so open to what I have to say and to my ideas, which is fantastic to see. There's also a really big centre and focus on that kind of intergenerational equity principle, you know, caring about our future generations and what the planet will look like for them. So it is kind of a key message within the protocol itself to the Council of Europe for adopting this protocol. We should be protecting the environment and state it not only now, but in the future for the people that will come after us. So it's just been an absolutely amazing experience. I've been given so many opportunities from it, which I'm so grateful for. But it's just fantastic to see that adults from all across the world, because there are over 500 organisations involved in this coalition, really care about children's rights and having that youth voice reflected in this kind of policy making, and to consider the fact that it is at the EU level. I think that's just really amazing, and it's very positive when we think of it. You know, hopefully it will continue well into our future. So yeah, I'm very lucky to be involved.
Thanks, Dave, and hopefully it will continue well into our futures. And I think it's great that there was such interest and support in having young people involved in those spaces as well. So, Katie, I'm going to turn over to you now. Can you tell us a little bit about your work to help children have their say, when most often it's adults who are the ones who are being heard in citizens' assemblies, and how this then led to the development of guidance that you worked on involving children in citizens' assemblies, and what it is that you've learned along the way?
And yeah, I think first of all to say that, of course, adults are most are the ones that are most commonly heard within democratic processes. We know that adults typically have the right to vote, whereas younger people, particularly those under 18, don't always have the opportunity. There is a move to reduce the lowering the voting age to 16 in some places, even 15 in some. But we know that there's still a long way to go until all children are able to inform the democratic systems and processes through the voting mechanism. So globally, there's been a real shift to also rethinking how we can complement voting and how we can actually have other ways of doing democracy, and really bringing people together. We know that there's all sorts of things that are meaning that people are feeling more isolated from one another, feeling more divided in terms of opinion. And it's really important that we're bringing all generations together to have conversations about what kind of world we want to live in and for children to grow up in. So one of the ways that, or a kind of model of policy making that has been on the rise over the last 20 years has been what you mentioned, Leanne, citizens' assemblies. And this is a way of bringing people together who are randomly selected by lottery to represent their community or their city or even their nation, their country. And this is a way of helping people to come together, learn about an issue that is affecting that particular area, and then to deliberate, so to discuss and really unpack this issue coming from their different perspectives before forming recommendations. And that's the process that Neve described in terms of the Children's Assembly, which looked to think about how we can do citizens' assemblies with children. But in terms of involving children, this is actually relatively new. The first example of children being involved in a citizens' assembly was actually only 5 years ago, this very month. So we've seen a huge surge of these processes over the last 5 years looking to involve children. And this has meant that there's also a lot of interest in people learning how to do it, because I think a lot of people that are maybe confident designing or facilitating processes with adults are less sure about how to do this with children and young people. And so I've been working with people all over the world to think about, so how do we do this and how do we help people feel really confident to do that? And as Neve said, the most important part of this is involving children and young people themselves in designing these assembly processes so that they're really fun and meaningful, and also putting children and young people at the heart of them. So that's what we've been doing as part of a big community of us working on this issue, and we've created guidance to help others do the same.
Thanks, Katie. It's helpful to hear, and thanks for unpacking what kind of a citizens' assembly means. I'm curious if you could share what you feel the impact that children and young people in these spaces have had, and have you seen that it's been meaningful, as a term that we quite often use, and that there's been actual follow-up with the decision makers, telling them what the result of their participation was? I mean, did it result in policy changes?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's a number of different things that are different impacts that these processes have had. And at one level, it's about really helping the individuals involved, so the children and young people involved, to learn and to understand better these issues that are affecting them, and to then come up with their own recommendations. So we hear from the assembly members, those that were randomly selected, that they develop new skills, new confidence, new friendships, and also just that bigger understanding of how their voice matters and how they can contribute to decision making. But then kind of one step beyond that, we also see how the assembly members, so again, the children and young people involved, go on to educate others. They're with that learning that they've developed, they also play a really important role in telling other children and young people about the issues that they've been learning about, but also their families, their friends, their communities. And we really see a lot of children and young people go on to take action themselves, as well as submitting recommendations to their government or their local authority. And so it's really amazing to see how not only they can create change through the recommendations they put forward, but also that they're taking initiative themselves. For example, in Ireland, with the process Neve worked on, we've seen children go on to set up their own eco-newspapers, to kickstart tree planting initiatives, to run campaigns. There's been an amazing amount of work that's been done by the assembly members themselves to spread the word.
But then at that policy level, yeah, again, there's kind of, one of the challenging things about this is that often these kind of changes take a long time, and we are relatively, it's not been long since these processes took place. But it is encouraging to see that the people that received the recommendations, so for example, in Ireland, the government have committed to, first of all, involving children and young people in decision making going forward. They've really been so impressed by and taken by the ideas that the children shared that they've committed to making this a long-term thing. And then secondly, we've also seen how children and young people have contributed to a general sense that their voices need to be heard, not just in Ireland, but further afield. And so we're seeing how other people are learning from what happened there and also replicating these assemblies at all levels, in schools, in museums, in councils, and again, up to the national level. So I think in terms of the concrete policy, it's still early days, but we can see that there's a real interest and appetite from the government, people involved to bring those ideas into life.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. Really helpful to learn from your experience on this. And last but not least, I'm going to turn over to you, Ben. You've been present at a lot of global climate spaces like COP. And so I'm curious what your experience has been like at these kind of global spaces with decision makers there. And also, can you tell us why, maybe in addition to these spaces for young people at the regional or international levels, we might also need things like children's assemblies at the more national or local levels?
Yeah, so first I went to COP, so the Convention of the Parties, the big climate conference held to be already UN. I was 16. It was a little overwhelming. I went alone. It was new. I didn't really know what to expect when I came there, but it was a strange place, but also a place full of opportunity, a place where real things can happen. And something that really struck me is that some leaders, the more pro-climate leaders, they always said yeah, we want young people. They're really the ones that made the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, basically every climate action globally too. Young people made that happen. It was because of the strikes that those things really that it went faster, that people really started worrying about climate. So young people are really important. And since then, my first COP was in Egypt, COP 27. Then I went to Dubai, COP 28, and Azerbaijan, COP 29. So we've been to 3 COPs now, and it's a strange place. But it's also a place where really it's very important to go and really know I want to do this. And then most of the time you get to talk with so many interesting people, also meet young people from all around the world and really share your experiences, because that's why young people at COPs are so important, because we know what the climate crisis is, we know what's in front of us, and we share our experiences. Like me, I talk about how I lost my friend Rosa in the Belgian-German floods, 2021. My friends Beauty and Rosina talk about their experience in Bangladesh, how their school literally fell into the water and their parents thought about marrying them out because that would be the best life for them. And then my friend Kato from Tuvalu, the small island in the Pacific that's literally sinking, just talks about that he wishes he didn't have to be at COP. He wants to be on his island, but his island is literally sinking, so he has to be there. So that's why young people at those places are so important. And I also think that climate assemblies, children climate assemblies, should be really vital in those spaces, because 1/3 of the population globally is under 18 years old. So we need those children. It's about their future. Children know what needs to happen, so they should be represented at those places, nationally, internationally, regionally, but also at COP, at the UN level. So that's probably my message. Don't wait until you're 18. Just when you see a problem, gather your friends, engage, and speak up to make sure things happen.
Thank you so much, Neve, Katie, Ben, for sharing your experiences with the involvement of children and young people in policy making spaces. Some of those being climate spaces. It was really, really helpful to learn from what you all have shared. So for all of you at the conference on youth policy making spaces, we hope that you have a really wonderful, wonderful time. And thanks for inviting us to join.
All right, guys. I'm going to close that down and stop sharing my screen to allow Andrzej to introduce himself.
Hi everyone. Thanks a lot for having me. I will also share my screen to make use of a small presentation that I prepared for all of you. And before I get to my name and what I do and why I'm here, I would like to talk a bit about the topic that I'm here to cover. The topic is meaningful youth participation. And uh, when I think about it, to me, it's exactly like a fluid thing, hard to describe, but at the same time, very beautiful when it actually happens. And that's why I chose this weirdo image as the title of the presentation. Um, Before I go further, and it's already been touched upon in the previous video, and I'm really glad it happened. What I'm not going to be talking about today is voting. And I'm not going to be talking about it for three different reasons. Firstly, the obvious age discrepancy. So here in Europe, the usual voting age is 18. There's certain countries like Austria and Belgium which allow young people as young as 16 to actually vote. But nevertheless, there is a massive gap between the voting age and the fact that the policies that are actually pushed for by the representatives also apply to young people and children who are not allowed to vote. So that is the first reason why I won't talk about voting. The second reason is that there is a very important thing, which I really believe is exactly what we're talking about here. And that's what I would call the in-between elections democracy. And that is the everyday democracy. That is actually the policy in the making. And the last reason is that this democracy, this in between elections democracy, is actually happening on different levels. Um, so it's not necessarily always connected to any elections. Think about everyday institutions like schools. There is democracy that can be happening over there. There is democracy that can be happening at the level of city districts and even lower, even in your neighborhood where there is actually no elected representative. It's your street, for example. And what I really want to be talking about is the democracy that we create all of us together. And I believe that that is what meaningful youth political participation is actually contributing to. So, this being said, we agreed with Paul so that I will speak for 10 to 15 minutes. I just set up my stopwatch. Let's see how successful I am. So, my name is quite difficult for English speakers. My name is Ondřej because I come from the Czech Republic. One of the things that my parents didn't do really well. So, in the English-speaking environment, which is where I mostly work anyway, people call me Onrush, just as I would be on Rush. So I suppose that's easier. If you want to address me, that I would be very happy. It's the form of my name that many of my friends and colleagues use anyway. So my name is Onrush, and what I do is I'm a freelance youth researcher and consultant, and I also work with people, dialogue, and change. And what I do is I focus on young people and how they participate in society, especially in this in-between elections democracy. This slide is also useful to point out one thing, and that's the concept of the whole presentation. So I tried to make this presentation as a resource for you. So there will always be these QR codes, which you can actually scan with your phone, and you can go to dig a bit deeper on your own, either now or later. I'm also happy, Paul, to share the presentation with whoever wants it, with anyone really. But anyway, even now, if you want to, you can just scan the QR code. It's going to take you to a website, and you can dig in deeper either now or later on as you wish. So, without further ado, let's dive into it. So first things first, what actually is political participation? Political participation is a process that involves you, all of you guys, being active, as opposed to just passively sitting somewhere. Why is that? Because if you are not active, then you're not participating. If you're not active, then your voice doesn't count because it doesn't exist. It's also a process which needs to be voluntary. as opposed to somebody just dragging you somewhere or telling you to do something. That's not it. The process needs to be there because you want it to be there. So if your teacher creates a structure, then it still should be voluntary. It shouldn't be that somebody is assigned to do something. That's not participation. That is being assigned homework, basically. It's also citizenship driven. We all have different interests. Political participation is not about business interests. It's not about personal interests. It's about interests of the society. So you should be entering this arena of political participation as a citizen, and you should think about what I can do to make all of our lives better. And last but not least, political participation aims at systemic political change. You know that in all of your local communities, you can do lots of things. You can go and volunteer and help out and all of this. And that, in my understanding, is not strictly political participation. It's participation, but it's not really political because it doesn't aim at this systemic long-term change. It's awesome to do that. I'm not saying that anything against it. It's just that when it comes to political participation, there really should be this aim of changing something in a bit of a long term. I really like the debate you guys had earlier on the usage of phones in the schools, for instance. That is exactly what political participation is about. It's about setting rules for all of us and debating and deliberating on what these rules should be like, what would be the advantages, disadvantages, and how to make it the best for all of us. So once again, it's active, it's voluntary, it's citizenship driven, and it's about systemic change. If you want to know more, again, the QR code will take you to a publication. It's one of mine that I wrote with a friend of mine and a colleague of mine from Italy. And we go a bit more in depth as to what it is and what's the different forms. So feel free to have a look. What is political participation not? In here, you see something that is called a Hart's ladder. Hart, because Hart is the very smart person who created this ladder, and this Hart's ladder, because it very obviously is a ladder, and Hart's ladder is a 30-plus-year-old idea, which is today just as useful as it was 30 plus years ago. Why it's useful is because those lowest three rungs, if you look at the picture, describe what political participation is not. And I think it's very important to be aware of it as well. Let's take it one by one. So manipulation. Manipulation is when somebody asks you a question, but at the same time gives you the right answers. This is manipulation. This is not participation. The second rung is called decoration. Decoration means that somebody would invite you over and say, hey, this is going to be a political participation event, structure, or initiative. And then you would get there and you would not be included, but somebody would perhaps take a picture with you or take a video where you would be in the background. So that is a decoration. You are just being abused for being there, but you are not given voice. You are not asked any questions. That's just decoration. That's not participation. And last but not least, there is also tokenism. Tokenism is something that is mentioned, I would say, the most out of these three negative phenomenons. And I think it's because it involves deception. So it's not that hard, it's not that easy to spot, actually. Tokenism means that you are asked to contribute, but when you do, when you actually use your voice, when you use your activity, when you use your energy, there is absolutely no follow-up. So the activity in itself is meaningless, is tokenistic, and that's why it is also not political participation. You can see that the ladder actually goes on through all of these different types, which actually are participation. They are just different levels, and they go all the way to the top, where if I would give you a different name for this young people initiated activity, it would be co-decision making. And I think this is actually a really interesting category in itself. We can talk about it later, but this co-decision making is kind of at the very top, because that means that your voice is not only heard, but that you actually have also the voice in decision making, not only in drafting or designing the policies. So now that we know what political participation is and is not, let's have a look at some formats that we have here in Europe in practice. And I'll always give you a format, and then I'll always give you a practical example, and I'll give you a bit of a description. So let's start with consultations. Consultation means that you as young people are invited to voice your opinions on a certain policy. Here, in the context of the European Union, we have something that is called the EU Youth Dialogue. The EU Youth Dialogue is the most massive consultation mechanism on the planet. Every 1.5 years, we reach over 30,000 young people all across the EU and beyond, and we ask them their opinion on certain burning issues. We then collect these opinions and we create, together with young people at events, at summits, which are called the EU Youth Conferences. I actually just got back from the last one, which took place in Denmark last week. And we co-create with young people these recommendations, and those are then forwarded to the European Commission, who is taking them on board. One of the examples of how it actually really has been taken on board is the European Youth Goals. The European Youth Goals are policy priorities drafted by young people who took part in the EU Youth Dialogue in 2017-18. I was actually lucky enough to be there already in the capacity of a researcher and to support that process. And as a result, the European Youth Goals have been added to the EU Youth Policy, which is the umbrella policy for young people in the European Union. So I think this is a massive achievement where young people in the EU actually co-created the policy for themselves in the EU. So this is consultation. So even just being asked what young people think can be a very powerful mechanism to get people involved. Another one can be youth councils or youth parliaments, really depends on where you are. It's called this or it's called that. Youth councils and youth parliaments are usually permanent bodies, or at least long-term bodies, which are representing the voices of young people on different topics. As an example, I mean, we already had speakers from Ireland. As an example, I chose the National Youth Council of Ireland. The reason why I chose it is because if you scan the QR code, it's going to take you to a web page which is in English, which I suppose is a good thing. But otherwise, we have the National Youth Councils in every single EU member state. So every single EU country has got a National Youth Council. What they do is they represent young people in that country when it comes to negotiations with the national government, but also when it comes to talking to the EU institutions. I have another example here. It's called Euphoria Northwest, or as they also abbreviated, YOFO. YOFO is working at a different level. This is a regional platform in England, in the northwest of England, which actually supports the local youth councils so that they are able to come together at the regional level to coordinate, to learn from one another, and to spend time with each other. Because as we already heard, and I'm going to be getting to that too, part of this political participation, youth political participation process is also a learning journey. And this should be also stressed. We did with People Dialogue and Change, we supported Youthphoria through evaluation and impact assessment. That's on their website too, so have a look. And this is also a really nice example of how this can work on the regional level, not only on the national. Then we can also mention youth advisory boards. Youth advisory boards are kind of similar to youth councils, but they are usually focusing on a certain topic or theme, and they are not necessarily permanent, because when the theme is resolved, then these advisory board can also simply disappear. As an example, I'm giving you the Provec Youth Board. Provec is an international NGO which deals with plant-based diets. And as we all know, the climate crisis is here. There's all sorts of initiatives which are here to deal with the climate crisis. And one of them is also to change how we eat, because that has a massive impact on the environment. And this NGO created a youth board to actually hear the voices of young people and to help them reach young people, to help them also be as youth friendly as they can be, and to represent them at some events completely. Another example of a mechanism for political participation are the youth citizens panels. This is somehow similar to consultations, but it's a bit more structured, and it's usually also done by a concrete institution. So the example I'm going to give you is the European Citizens Panels. These are held by the European Commission. They are held very regularly, and they are held on different topics. So there can be a citizens panel on energy, a citizens panel on housing, a citizens panel on mobility, for instance. How that works is that the European Commission invites together 150 people from all of the EU countries. And the really important aspect is that 1/3 of these people are always young people under 26 years of age. So there is this guarantee that young people's voice is strong in each of these European citizens panels. This panel comes together for, let's say, about a month, and they repeatedly deliberate on a given topic. They are also given inputs so that they widen their views. And then eventually they create recommendations which are submitted to the European Commission. And the European Commission gives a reply as to how these recommendations will be taken into account. Then we have participatory budgeting. You might have heard about this one. This is mostly a local initiative because it is basically taking a piece of budget and giving it to young people, not as in giving the money away, but giving it to initiatives which young people themselves come up with. As an example, there is a youth participatory budget in Cascais in Portugal, but they are actually happening all over the place. They are also quite popular in South America, and I believe they are also happening in the US. And it's always the same structure. So there is a certain sum of money. There is always a call for proposals for initiatives. And these can be really anything. It can be a new skate park. It can be upgrading the youth center. It can be having series of workshops on certain topics. It can really be anything. And then these initiatives are supported with the budget. And often young people are also involved in implementing these projects, which I think is also, again, providing a bit of a further learning for young people. And last but not least, I also would like to mention, even though I'm already over my time slightly, sorry about that, I would like to mention democratic schools, because we also talked about how all of this democracy and everyday democracy is something that we co-create every day and all the time, all of us together. And because all of you are engaged in schooling, or most of you are engaged in schooling, you know that schools maybe are not the most democratic institutions. They can be quite hierarchical, they can be quite top-down. We have something called democratic schools in Europe, and I think, or I believe they can also be found in the US and also in South America. And the example I'm giving you is the democratic school Colibri from the Czech Republic. This school operates on a simple principle that everyone's voice counts. So every single decision of that school is actually deliberated by everyone, by all the students, by all the teachers. Everyone has got one vote, and they all simply agree on what's going to happen next. Recently, they have built a new gym, as in a completely new building at their school. And that is a decision they took as a collective decision. Okay, we need a new gym. This is what we want it to look like. And all of the kids and all of the young people, and really they gather young people from 7 to 15 years of age. So all of them contributed, all of them agreed on what's going to happen and how. And then it was kind of delegated to the adults to take care of the practicalities, but all of the decisions were taken by everyone in the school. If you want to find more examples, I really find this website quite useful, participedia.net. That is where the QR code will take you. You can search by area, you can search by mechanism. There's very many really useful examples of how young people can engage in political participation. And two last things, two tools that can be helpful to you. So first tool is Cookbook of Meaningful Youth Political Participation, a book that I wrote some time ago. It gives you a bit of theoretical background, but then there's a ton of examples from all over the world how these things can happen. The QR code will take you there. Feel free to browse through. And also a change tracker. Change tracker is a tool that we created with my friend and colleague Dan Moxon from People Dialogue and Change. And it actually helps you to critically think about what it is you're doing, whether you're going in the right direction, what are the impacts that you're actually creating through your initiatives. So again, something that I believe is worth having a look at. And now the scariest part. So I shared my thoughts with you, and now it's also time for me to share the stage. So I'm open to receive questions.
Great, Andras, if you could turn off your slides and we'll open it up. We've got just 13 minutes left, and I want to respect your time, guys. If you could raise your hands electronically to ask questions, make comments, etc., and so forth. I do want to emphasize something that you've probably heard in this second part about kind of what's happening in Europe, which is that there's a difference between citizens as voters and citizens as deliberators. And the reason why we've been calling you guys young deliberators is because you don't as yet have the right to vote, but you do have the right to deliberate. And that's what Ondras and the others emphasized. And it's actually a much more meaningful role than just voting. Voting is very important, don't get me wrong, but your role as deliberators means that you're actually thinking together, talking together, considering each other's views, and coming up with policy proposals that we then carry on and share with others for adults to hear. So keep that in mind. You are young deliberators. You're not yet voters, but you are young deliberators. So questions, comments, etc., and so forth. Suzanne.
Mine is more a comment, but a sort of an encouragement. And partly from my own memory, I started on Capitol Hill, my first job as a professional, and I thought I knew nothing, and I was 25, not as young as you guys. But I would make a pitch for the comments that people have made in the discussion about research. It sounds boring, et cetera, but if you grab an issue that really touches you at the heart, you won't mind doing the research. You'll find yourself in liking the reading, wanting to read more, and trust yourself that you are probably going to be the expert in the room. As Mayor Silverberg mentioned, like some people vote, have the ability to vote on a city council and don't necessarily know what they voted for. That happens in Congress. I hate to say it, it's a frightening thought, but you will be in meetings if you do your research right. Well, you will find yourself being the expert. So don't be timid about, oh, I'm so young, I'm the youngest person in the room. Trust me, if you do your research, you'll have a voice and you'll be surprised. So I just wanted to make a pitch for that.
Awesome. Would love to hear from some of our young people if you have any questions or comments and so on. Are you guys looking to particular issues that you're thinking about bringing forward on next Saturday in person that we haven't heard about yet? Because Ondrash talked about and CRIN.org, that organization we saw the video of, talked about the climate change. But there are lots of issues that you could be tackling, but just keep in mind you're trying to bring voice, and your proposals about the voice of young people in whatever issues you care about. So Letitia and then Charlie.
My question was actually just to look at the slide with the what is public I mean, political participation and what's not. Kind of missed it. I just wanted to look at it again.
Do you want to summarize, Andras? I mean, you can show the slide if you want, but just summarize in brief. What is political participation?
Absolutely. Should I show the slides?
Sure,
Just
you can do that.
let me just quickly go back there. Yes. So this is the slide. So political participation is a process, and it simply just is a process built on these four key elements. It's active, as in you really bring something to it and you don't stay just sitting there, you voice your opinions. It's voluntary, as in you want to be there, you choose to be there. Nobody pushed you, nobody mandated you to be there. It's citizenship driven, as opposed to, for example, defending your business interests. It's fine to have a company and to have your own interests, but that's not what political participation is about. Political participation is about thinking and talking about what is the best for all of us as human beings, not as business people, for instance. And it's aiming at systemic political change. So again, just like you talked in the previous session, for example, about the rules for the cell phones in the classes, I think that's a brilliant example of what I mean by systemic change. So systemic change doesn't necessarily mean a change at the level of the whole country. It can also be a change at the level of a school, and that's just as important because it includes all of you, and you should have a say in that. Is that helpful?
Yep. Looks like Letitia.
Yes, thank you so much.
And Charlie.
So I didn't really have a question about like the slides or anything, but I was just kind of thinking of something to bring up for the next meeting, or I just think that is important and I'd like to bring it up of like, I think it's important and I think it should be more widely known or have more resources for teens that are in like troubled homes or just in the lawmaking slash decision making process in general, where in certain situations or speaking from my experience, it's been some parents have been like prioritized, or because I have divorced parents, and one perspective was looked at in more favor than the other, despite what the evidence was. And I think it's important for there to have resources for the teens to be able to speak up in homes like that are not safe.
Great, Charlie. And one of the beautiful things about this is that you guys get to learn about other issues that other kids are affected by that may not affect your family. But as Ondrash pointed out, you're thinking about the public interest. You're not just thinking about your interest, but what you think is going to be good for all kids. And that's why we're focusing on how do we give you guys voice, and that's going to be your focus is how do we give you voice. You can focus on a particular issue, but the central question is how do we give you voice? And at those levels that we're focusing on, and I just want to emphasize school, city, county, and or state levels. Why those levels and why not in the national level? Because you have more voice, you have more potential to have real voice at those levels. And you live in this area, the DC region, you can actually meet with some of the people that are involved in decision making at those levels. Of course, you also live in DC, so you could meet your congressional representatives for the national level, but it's just harder to influence things at those levels. And most people tend, when they think of politics, they think the national level, and they don't think of the vast majority of democracy, which actually happens below the national level at those state, county, city, and school levels. Olivia, and then Jordan.
Hi, I'm Olivia Mona, and I just had a question about our meeting at the summit. Um, I'm very concerned about like the poor and the marginalized. I'm just wondering if we're gonna go more into like depth about like kids having access to food because I have heard that like, government is cutting off food stamps for kids, and I'm just like had a question about that.
Mhm. We're not so much going to be necessarily dealing with like a particular issue, although you guys are going to have more or less an hour. Leah, who is with us, is going to be moderating, and I'm going to give her some liberty to kind of like decide exactly how much time you guys have. But right now, you're scheduled to have an hour in small groups to talk to each other after we just do some introductions. And so in that time, you will be able to talk about issues, the stuff that you care about. But then you want to kind of figure out, because you're only in your small groups, you're only coming up with one policy. And it's got to be a policy you can focus on a particular issue if you want to, but you can also just say, okay, we just want to make sure that young people have voice in, let's say, at the city level, in all cities across the DC region, and this is how we think they should have voice in policy making. So do you see? So that's your charge. That's what you're charged with developing. It's not so much talking through a particular issue, but figuring out how you want to give voice to kids on either one issue or on a lot of issues at those levels of government, school, city, county, or state. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, yeah. Jordan.
Hi, so I wanted to bring up at the next summit, broadening the range of access that people have, especially in schools, to basic healthcare. And by that, I mean to sanitary products, because at my school, at least, and a lot of other schools, women don't have access to like sanitary products that they would need. And when you're at school, you can't like go home to go get that. And that what it isn't a direct impact, but it definitely impacts people's education because they have to worry about, do they have this with them? Do they have that? And I think that's something that needs to be talked about more, and then needs to be a policy that schools have to have these products for people.
Yep. Great stuff. So you guys, I just want to emphasize, are going to have the opportunity in your small groups and in the large group, right, when you consider each other's proposals, to hear just a variety of issues that you care about. And then just keep in mind that we want to give you voice, and that's what you're charged with, is how do we give you more voice so that it's not just about one issue, but about giving you guys some say in policy making. We have just 2 more minutes, and I need to finish up. But Olivia, you had a quick question, and then Suzanne, and then and then finish. Oh, you're all done. Okay, so Suzanne.
Brianna wanted to go too. She had her hand up, so I don't want to cut into any of the youth.
Yep. Brianna, did you have?
I was just going to give a resource that related to a lot of questions that the children had to say or ask. And one resource that works with George Washington University is the Honey Nashman Center for Civic Relations. So they also do a lot of help with policy and engaging with younger students, college students, on how to make impact and how that can affect policy for the younger generation.
Great. Brianna, can you put that link in the Zoom chat?
Yes.
Great.
Mine was a quick practical point for next weekend. To Olivia's point, and actually Jordan's too. If you have an issue and you've read about it, or you saw something online that you think that drove you to think about it and consider it an issue, bring that with you, because I think in the group discussions, what you'll be able to do is consider how can I make youth voices known in this context? How can I bring youth voices to the table to make this issue, to advance this issue? It'll help you, I think through how to bring youth together if you bring the issue on your phone with whatever it is you read or whatever it is you find in the next week about it. It goes back to the point we were making about doing research. You'll have your research done if you bring something to the table next week. That's it.
Great. So I am going to stay on after at 3 o'clock, beyond 3 o'clock, if there are those of you who still have questions and so on. But I want to finish off just with some concluding remarks. One is, first and foremost, thanks to all of our speakers, Ondrash, who's joined us, and it's now I think it's 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. your time in Europe. It's 9 p.m. So thank you for taking part of your Saturday to help inform our young deliberators. I want to thank our mentors who are here and that you guys will be meeting in person next week. So Mayor Silverberg and Paul Friedman, who Mayor, I think I can't see everybody on my screen readily, but Paul Friedman, who spoke, my sister Suzanne, who's going to be one of the mentors, and we have a variety of other people here who are mentors, but also our young mentors who presented so ably in the first half of this session. So next Saturday, just to be clear to you guys, we're going to be meeting at, you should get to the summit around 12:30. We will be starting at 1 o'clock. We have a tight schedule. There's a lot for you guys to cover, so it's really important for you to get there early. So 12:30, and there is All Souls Unitarian Church. It is at 1500 Harvard Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. That is an 8-minute walk from the Columbia Heights station on the Green Line. If you want to take the metro, there is street parking. And so you have details about all that in an email that I sent to you and your parents. If you did not get that email, you should let me know and perhaps send that in the Zoom chat or just stay afterwards while I answer any questions. And is there anything else that I want to point out? I think
Paul,
that's it.
can
Yes.
I ask Paul that we had a question about dress code. I answered casual, but maybe you have a different thing in mind.
Yes, correct. Casual, but just, dress decently. But yes, casually, you need to be comfortable. And bring your water bottle for yourself. We will have snacks on hand for sale. We are going to have after the summit a comedy show with everybody can participate in, and then we're going to have a culminating party, and there we'll have free sweets. As well as raffle tickets, by the way. So all of you, if you've completed this session, if you complete the next session, if you do the pre-survey and the post-survey, you get 4 tickets, 4 raffle tickets for prizes up to $100 in cash. But those will not be given until the actual culminating party around 5:30 p.m. So if you stick around, you're eligible for some serious prizes, and it looks like Sammy's pretty excited. Um, so, any other quick questions before I let you all go? Actually, you know what? I should let you all go. It's past 3 o'clock. I'm staying on the Zoom if you have any other questions, but otherwise, thank you all for coming. Ondrash, thanks again, and see you guys next Saturday.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.